just become the market, if you will, for Arizona. Without missing a beat, he said, well, that's easy. He says, we don't trust the government. And that was the answer to the question. So, in the head shop, yes. Oh, you have a question? Well, fire away, then I'll go back.
With all due respect, I really appreciate what each of you presented, and there's a part that goes together for me that I really like for you to address. It sort of gave guidance to the younger generation and operating in one organization. My name is Jim Harvey. I'm a fifth-year forester. I live in Merrill County, Montana. We've been collaborating with the Forest Service and the county commissioners for about 20 years. I've been involved in 20 years. We've had three generations of district rangers and three generations of forest supervisors. We start over each time. We live in the area that is what a lot of people refer to as New York, the 1910 fire that went to the Canadian border. We have more mortality than growth on the local national coast. It is not true. So we are just waiting for the big burn. Indian country has been managing forests forever. Right? Where is the perfect opportunity for a model how to manage and help people? I would really like to see that be something that we take on Indian country, how to manage and help people. Maybe the discussion of the anchor forest, and days, part of that, I don't know. But couldn't it be, there's, in a forest system, the young people don't even understand something. And it's happening all over. You have the opportunity and the structure and the personnel, the people, the commitment to provide the model for us. Help. Please address it.
Who wants to take that on? Yes.
I can start. Yeah. So I think, Jim, great story. Good. There's so many different strings in there I want to pull on, right? So one of the things I think of, because ultimately the answers here should be focusing on those middle 2 or 3 rows right there where everybody raised their hands, because you're going to be the folks that are going to be dealing with this sooner rather than later. But I think that there's a couple things. One that comes to mind is it's this right now this lack of interoperability, complete interoperability between the organizations. There's incredible work that's being done between Forest Service, DLI, all the federal agencies, and even working with tribal partners in the tribal programs, whether it's through Tribal Forest Protection Act, using service first agreements, good neighbor authority, right? There's all these tools in the toolbox for a land manager to have. And going one step above that, during the previous Congress, I think it was House Bill 2647, which was introduced by Congressman Westerman from Arkansas. And it would, really focused on Forest Service issues, but one of the areas that touched on the Department of the Interior was how can we improve the interrelationship or the interoperability between whether it's BIA, BLM, interior lands, or the tribal programs through 638 or self-governance compacts. How can we lessen the blurred, or the lines that are blurred right now? How can we shore that up? So another version of that bill has been introduced under this Congress as well. It's got a different number. I don't know it off the top of my head. But part of the here's a real technical term for you in DC, right? Part of the sausage making that goes on in putting laws together is discussing different aspects of what the members actually are trying to attend, and then what the agencies are educating on what can actually be done, how you can execute on a law that would come through. One of the discussions is the difference between NFMA, National Forest Management Act, and NFIRMA, right? So if you look at both of those acts, NFIRMA has almost an identical table of contents as NFMA, minus some other, very distinct differences. The areas within NFIRMA align almost identically with NFMA, other than a few issues around trust responsibility and those pieces. And so one of the discussions that's taken place is, what if we were to use NFIRMA and apply that in places where, whether it's borderland, so if it's a place where we would normally have a TFPA project, if it's a place where you could have normally used a good neighbor authority agreement and use those templates, if it's another place where there's a cost share agreement or some other kind of contracting vehicle, what would happen if we actually used NFIRMA as the overriding governing authority to actually manage those borderlands or those areas? And then, at some point there's a transition zone in there. And that is a robust conversation. There's another technical term, right? I mean, talk about pushing people's values and in areas where we're trying to build consensus. But, really this comes down to, and this is where I point back to our students that are with us now, being innovative. And just because the four of us up here have come up through the system and learned a certain way to do business, this is not the end all be all. A lot of the places are going to be sitting with all of you and looking at this differently and saying, yeah, there's some things that are core to the business and what you're doing, but how do we change it? How do we tweak the edges? How do we maybe actually turn the whole thing upside down and do business differently to get to these outcomes, right? Because it's really about outcomes. It's less about how we do the business. It's the outcome. And in your case, Jim, you're talking about healthy forests and all the outputs that go with it.
I can go next. So Brian mentioned some policies, and all the work that we do is within this framework of regulations and law and policies and all of that. And Indian Country has done great work out there, and being from Mescalero, always get complimented on our own reservation forest lands. Oh, you guys have a great forest. And one of the things that I dealt with a lot out there was we have a great forest because we don't have to have NEPA, and we don't have to consider the Mexican spotted owl. Yeah, right. Of course, NEPA being one of the processes that we have to go through on the Forest Service and the BIA, all federal agencies have to go through this NEPA process. So one of the things that I think can help us go into the direction of becoming more of a model of good forest management is figuring out how to manage that NEPA process. One of the benefits I found coming from a BIA agency, our NEPA was for a small public, right? Our public just being limited to our tribal members and our tribal leadership. And with the Forest Service, we all know that's not the case. I'm in New Mexico, and man from Connecticut can sue us over an issue, and he's never been to our forest and has never intended on going to our forest. And so the issues are complex. I think one of the things that we can do to improve that and to help drive some of the work is doing larger landscape type of NEPA projects, more programmatic type of NEPA, to get more land covered so we can have a lot of stock shelf, a lot of acres covered by the NEPA, because without that NEPA clearance, without those decision letters, decision notices on this land, we can't get anything done. And I think in the past, a lot of the agency work has just spent doing NEPA, never really being focused on implementation. And what I hear you say is, well, we need to be focused more on implementation, because this is how we're going to fix the forest, basically. And we can't do that unless we fix the NEPA process.
Yes, sir. You have a question?
Just wanted to say that we've been working with Nolan on a number of projects on the Snake River, and we are using nationally important resources management act, the Indian Trust accounts. We've been working with them together using Service First. So I think what's mostly needed is going
county as a fiduciary to utilize these tools that Indian people and tribes fought for to avoid mechanisms such as the federal acquisition regulation, to promote these kind of investment opportunities, to restore tribal management across the landscape. So I'm grateful for Nolan. I was afraid when he put on that green shirt, he was going to forget the things that he valued as far as tribal management, but he never did. He still invested in Indian country, and we're grateful for that. So come by, see our booth. We got all that kind of
I love it. Yes, sir.
So before we go there, before we get off that topic, I wanted to respond to the gentleman's question about the Montana. I don't understand all of the land ownerships in Montana and don't understand the circumstances, but in our neck of the woods, I'll try to relate something to that. And I appreciate Brian's response because he explained things pretty well about how things work. I'm just going to share perspective from on the ground. And as a ranger, I always try to say I got one boot still on the ground. And so one of the things that I see and ways to help is and I'm referring to the example that we're doing right there on my district and working with the tribe. We and you asked about how tribes could be used as models and how that land management has been going on for years. Well, that's changed over the years though. NIFRMA has changed stuff as well as a lot of other acts, and tribes don't get to do exactly what they want to do anymore. There's some laws that they need to follow. So you can ask any tribe. On one hand, they're doing a lot of stuff, but there's still some controls that they don't like. ESA is a hindrance, and they use it on their side sometimes. So there's some things that you got to understand. Tribes aren't all the same, and so they all have a little bit of different take. There's some tribes that are self-governance; they totally govern most of their own affairs. Some tribes still work with the BIA, and so there's some differences. And so there's a lot of differences across the country. But in my neck of the woods there, one of the projects we're working on, or one of the things that we're working on with our relationships in our communities and collaboratives is where the tribe has this effort is more organic. It's more grassroots. It's growing up from the community itself, rather than coming down from above of here's a direction you need to be doing these sorts of things. And that probably is a part of the key to the successes that we've had so far. And I think one of the other parts of that is the tribe is one of the main players in that. And the receptiveness of the Forest Service to work with the tribe there it is probably a key in that success too. But one of the things that we're including is Brian mentioned and others mentioned some of Frank Lake's work about traditional ecological knowledge and how that can be applied out here in different landscapes. But there's a whole issue about other peers that don't recognize some of that. The court has to